Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, October 5th, 2021. Time for another show. It's a Tuesday, first Tuesday in October. You know what that means. That means yesterday was the first Monday in October. Beginning of a new Supreme Court session. We didn't pay any attention to that. But really, what could possibly be going on at the Supreme Court, at this point, that anybody is interested in? Anybody? Anything? No? I don't know. Well, we probably should turn our eyes to that at some point. But it won't get exciting until later on. But they are, I guess, back. I wonder how Brett Kavanaugh's doing. I know he had COVID the other day. I think he was hearing arguments remotely. So, anyway, they're just sitting there listening to stuff now, which is what you're doing. So, we might as well put you on the Supreme Court. How's that for a deal? I think we can probably work that out. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now, and you've already been nominated to the Supreme Court. So, how's that for a start? You know why Kagro X didn't get kicked off the air for several hours yesterday? Bill asks, and he's got the answer, and it's because this is true. He's not part of an evil social media empire. Look it up. That's true also. I quit the social media empire of evil that I used to associate with secretly, Hail Hydra, and, I'm on my own now. All right, well, that's true. Facebook was the big story yesterday. Not for me, because I don't give a hoot about what goes on at Facebook. I barely use it. I'm just, I'm lucky that way. I'm sure, had Twitter gone away for several hours, I would have been upset. And I don't know that I would have melted down or anything, but it would have bugged me in the way it bugged everybody else with Facebook. Facebook, of course, far more far-reaching. Yes, far more far-reaching. In fact, there we go. And a lot more people depend on it for their business websites and everything. And that, highlights the problem. We probably shouldn't be so dependent on something like that. Lots of great takes, I thought, yesterday, just offhand, people saying, this highlights the problem. Maybe we should be worried about something like this, which has become the default platform for so many businesses and for so many people to communicate. Although other people were saying it would be interesting to see if the outage lasted any longer, would vaccination uptake increase while all the disinformation was missing from the internet. That would have been something interesting to watch. I don't think it was going to move that quickly, but it was a good point. Brought to mind the idea of like Glinda, the good witch, making it snow, covering up the poppies for a few hours, and everybody waking up and saying, I'm crazy. Why didn't I take the vaccine? But it didn't last quite that long. But a lot of other more salient points made about it. In fact, where is that one? I'll have to scroll back and see if I can find it. One wag, as they love to say in the the New York newspapers of old, had cracked wise. Boy, I'm really going all out on this one. That I guess in the days prior to this outage, I guess the big news from Sunday night on Facebook was that there was a 60 minutes expose of sorts from an insider revealing that the extent to which Facebook already knew, how much trouble it was causing and what its algorithm was doing to radicalize people, and had basically turned away from that realization and tried to ignore it. And that was the focus of everything. And, yes, here we are. And when the Associated Press reported that the outage from yesterday came after a whistleblower who exposed Facebook's awareness of internal research into the negative effects of its products and decisions went public on 60 Minutes on Sunday. No word yet whether there's linkage between the two, but I guess everyone suspects this. And the clever comment, though, was from Aditya Sood, who is, let's see, a producer of in Hollywood, a Hollywood-type person, I guess. Produced The Martian, I like that one. The Deadpool movies, I like those. And then next, Spider-Verse 2, I missed one. And then a couple of other things. I don't really have to do a whole thing of promoting all the movies that are coming out. I'm sure they'll do great, including the one called Cocaine Bear. That's got to be awesome. I'm in line already. once, there's no coronavirus or anything. Anyway, the good joke was just pointing out, again, that the story from the AP was they ignored their own research into the negative effects of its products and saying Facebook dying after doing their own research feels very on brand. And I thought, well, that was just great. So I thought I'd share that one with you, both by choking in the morning. I thought that would add a little element of additional comedy, and sharing it with you on Facebook, sharing it with you here. And all right, so we'll see how our Tuesday goes. It is the first Tuesday, as I mentioned, in October. That's actually, of interest to us because Joan McCarter, who usually joins us on Tuesdays, was on vacation for the second half of September. Good timing. Didn't miss anything in terms of Infrastructure Week. She left, it was Infrastructure Week. She comes back, still Infrastructure Week, still fighting over the same things, well-timed vacation. And we'll see, whether events let her up from underneath all of that. I think she's probably pretty caught up, so hope to see her later on as well. Except, well, it's radio. But you know what I mean. Oh, God, don't hold me to this. All right, let's see. Other things that I have to share in Pocket and in scrolling back through Twitter, and that's really something else I need to do. Just check that I'm caught up with those things. In somewhat entertaining Donald Trump news, right? He's in more trouble, and it looks to be another bad week for him, which is fine, and also it doesn't matter a great deal, obviously, but of some interest, he faces a lot of pressure through the courts from a lot of different directions. As a matter of fact, Patrick Snyder sent me something the other day that was a compilation of one person's compilation of all the court jeopardy that they saw coming for Trump. It was a little speculative in terms of what the outcomes of those pressure points were likely to be, but just for fun, we can share all of that as well. But what we know is coming is this news. I saw it yesterday, didn't really put it aside until I thought, oh, well, here's two Trump stories to talk about how rough he's got it this week. This one, Business Insider, was the second mention I saw of this. Court orders Trump to give a deposition in a lawsuit over Summer Zervos's, remember her, sexual assault claims, and that deposition to take place before Christmas. It's like a war before Christmas that they're having. And, Trump does great in depositions. So that should be fun. And like I said, Business Insider reporting the details on this one. It's not long. We can share the story with you. A New York state court. He's going to have to go back there, and he might stay in Trump Tower while he's there. And, it might fall down while he's there. Anything could happen. Poorly constructed building. A New York state court said that Donald Trump must submit to a deposition by Christmas. Moving forward a stalled lawsuit from Summer Zervos, the former Apprentice contestant, in case you forgot which one she was, who accused the ex-president of sexual assault. In a virtual court hearing Monday afternoon, Michael Rand, a law clerk for New York State Judge Jennifer Schechter, who's overseeing the lawsuit, instructed lawyers for both Trump and Zervos to complete the factual discovery phase by December 23rd. That phase includes depositions of both Trump and Zervos. I do want to have an order entered and have the close of that discovery before Christmas, Rand said. We'll see whether that holds up. Zervos filed a lawsuit against Trump in 2017, accusing him of defamation when he publicly denied her accusation of sexual assault and called his accusers liars. Zervos claimed Trump kissed her against her will in 2007 in New York after she appeared on NBC's The Apprentice and later groped her in a California hotel. So bi-coastal, this abuse. Overall, 26 women have accused Trump of sexual misconduct, and there's probably more still. The lawsuit has been gummed up in the courts during Trump's presidency as his lawyers argued that a sitting president, and he was always sitting, shouldn't have to spend time defending himself against lawsuits. Yeah, well, tough crap. And, we settled that a long time ago. I'm amazed that they managed to keep this out of the courts while he was in office. But as Business Insider, previously reported, Trump didn't fight Zervos' attorney's attempts to move the lawsuit forward once he left office earlier this year. I don't know whether he changed his mind, or like recognizes limits or forgot or what. Attorneys for Zervos and Trump sparred in the Monday hearing over the remaining documents they needed before they could take depositions for the remaining parties. Alina Habba, the attorney representing Trump in the case, said she, wants additional medical records from Zervos and said she planned to file a claim under New York's new anti-SLAPP law, which is meant to deter frivolous lawsuits. Moira Kim Penza, the attorney representing Zervos, said that her client's lawsuit has been slowed for long enough. The president is a private citizen and he just cannot delay this case any longer, Penza said. So, that's the word. Let's see if there's a deposition, and you won't have to wait until Christmas to open that present if things go as planned. We'll just see about that, He's a master at getting courts to agree to give him one more delay over and over again, or his attorneys are anyway. So we'll see how that goes. Other bad-ish news for Trump. It would be not such bad-ish news for the rest of us. We would probably handle it a lot better, but this is going to bother him. Daily Beast reports here, Trump tumbles off Forbes rich list after COVID pandemic slashes his fortune. Okay, Jamie Ross reporting on this one. They have a little, I don't know what they call this thing. What would they, I don't know what this little additional comment here. It appears in the place where a subheader would normally appear, and it looks like it's one of those things that if it's a recurring feature, like a column. This one says tiny violin. So I don't know if Jamie Ross writes for the tiny violin vertical. Every time somebody needs a tiny violin played for them. Forbes magazine has released its annual list of America's 400 wealthiest people, and for the first time since 1995, one name is notable only by its absence, Donald Trump. The ex-president has featured on every single Forbes 400 since 1996, usually in the top half, usually because he's lying. But the magazine reported that Trump's estimated $2.5 billion fortune is $400 million short of this year's cutoff to get on the list. Forbes wrote that Trump's net worth has shrunk by $600 million since the start of the coronavirus pandemic because his portfolio is mainly made up of big city properties that have sat relatively empty for the past year and a half. The magazine added that Trump had a golden opportunity to offload his assets at the start of his presidency and is now paying the price for not doing so. It stated if Trump is looking for someone to blame, he can start with himself. Well, I blame him, so he can join me there. We did read a story not that long ago about the vacancy rate in Trump Tower and a balloon payment on a loan that's coming due. Like, what does he have, like a year to pay off $100 million or something ridiculous like that? Okay. Well, we'll sit and watch how that develops too, and we'll see whether he throws a tantrum over this or says Forbes is a fake magazine or anything like that. Okay. Let's see. A couple of other items. I just want to sort of jump around here in Pocket and get some of these things offloaded, really. Let's see. This I saw this morning from Greg Sargent over at the Plumb Line, and you always want to check in with what Greg's thinking and talking about. Slight shift off of the legislative maneuvering for today back to January 6th. And he says the revelations about Mike Pence's role in January 6th keep getting worse. I'd like to read that one. I put it aside without being able to skim it, so this is as much for my own benefit as yours. You may already have read it. It has become a ubiquitous question. It's an ubiquitous question in the old style, but people are dropping that. But it has become, well, there really should be. I mean, it's a U, it's a vowel, an ubiquitous question, but the way it's pronounced. In our politics, how close did Donald Trump come to pulling off an actual coup? Oh, and by the way, one of the things I put away in Pocket, let me open this up differently so I can have them both. An article that got recirculated yesterday, even though it was from January, that will answer that question, an opinion column. In fact, there were many that said something like this. The opinion piece titled, "Yes, it was a coup attempt. Here's why." Well, that's a very interesting thing, and lots of people thought the same thing, except this one is written by Fiona Hill, who you may recall from the impeachment proceedings on the Ukraine. It was nominally anyway, a Trump administration official. I mean, she was a real official. She was sort of a high-ranking foreign policy type, and had served, in multiple administrations. But, one of the very serious people that Trump was pissed off at because they actually understood that what was going on was wrong and said so. We remember Fiona Hill. Anyway, back to Greg Sargent, who you definitely remember. The revelations about Mike Pence's role in January 6th keep getting worse. Love it. Let's hear it. If it's what I think it is. Yeah, okay. It has become a ubiquitous question. I'm back to that. How close did Donald Trump come to pulling off an actual coup? Well, he certainly tried to. Efforts to grapple with this, that is to say, the ubiquitous question, have been trapped largely in the zone of wild speculation. But guess what? We may actually get a real answer to it soon enough. Key to this is the figure who has been portrayed as a hero of this sordid tale, not by me, because he refused to use his position as vice president to interrupt the count of electors in Congress, Mike Pence. This remains poorly understood, certainly by me. But the January 6th Select Committee is not just looking at the mob attack. It will also create a detailed account of how close we came to the unthinkable, to the procedural overthrow of a legitimately elected incoming government. The true contours of this emerge from a New York Times excavation of the role of John Eastman, the lawyer who wrote the Trump coup memo. It outlined how Pence supposedly could exercise unilateral power that he did not have over the process to refuse to count President-elect Joe Biden's electors, throwing the election to Trump. Buried in that piece is an important revelation. Pence apparently went further than previously known in probing whether he could execute a version of Eastman's scheme. The Select Committee will be fleshing this out. Jamie Raskin, a member of this committee, suggested in an interview. Raskin, a favorite source for Greg Sargent, and a good one. It makes sense. It's an important part of the historical record to determine how close Trump actually came to achieving this scheme of getting Pence to declare unilateral power to reject Electoral College votes, Raskin told me. Eastman met with Pence and Trump a few days before January 6th, the Times reports. Eastman tells the Times he suggested to Pence and his chief counsel, Greg Jacob, that Pence could merely delay counting the electors. This would kick things back to the states where GOP legislators could send rogue electors for Trump in defiance of the popular vote, and Pence could then refuse to count the real electors, triggering a contingent election in the House decided for Trump by state delegations. Some of this is known from the new book by Bob Woodward and Robert Costa, but the Times adds new texture from Eastman. He says, although Pence appeared resistant to the idea, he and Jacob, his counsel, Pence's counsel, did take it seriously. Mr. Eastman recalled getting in touch with Mr. Pence's legal counsel, Mr. Jacob, this obviously the excerpt from the Times because everybody's a Mr., got in touch with him the next day about whether Pence could delay the certification. I think Jacob was looking for a way for he and Pence, for him and Pence, to be convinced to take the action that we were requesting. And so I think he continued to meet with me and push back on the arguments and hear my counters, what have you, to try to see whether they could reconcile themselves to what the president had asked, Mr. Eastman said. Pence ultimately declared that he did not have this unilateral power, but the point is that if Eastman is correct, Pence and Jacob sought to be convinced otherwise. It's possible Pence simply went through these motions to placate Trump, but the January 6th committee will have to find out the full truth. Indeed, note that the committee's August demand for documents from executive branch agencies includes a demand for any and all documents and communications relating to Jacob, including ones concerning the constitutional process for certifying the electoral vote. That very well may illuminate just how far Pence was willing to go in entertaining the coup scheme, As Kyle Cheney notes, any day now, Trump will likely announce legal efforts to block the release of such documents. These new revelations illustrate the stakes there as well. All of this bodes badly for what's to come. And now a little discussion of what sorts of reforms might be necessary. And I think we've discussed that pretty extensively. So, I think they're going to go back to, trying to block anybody from exploiting vulnerabilities and tightening up the Electoral Count Act, etc. And, any speculation as to when that might happen? Well, not so far, but maybe I think they're hoping that the outcome of the probe into January 6th helps make the case that that's necessary. So I mentioned to you the, at this point, relatively old article, but because it's from Fiona Hill, I don't know if we shared it at the time. It doesn't ring a bell. It was written on January 11th, so fresh off of the insurrection, and I guess people were, you recall, and we still have this same problem, people disputing whether or not it really was a coup attempt. She's a foreign policy and intelligence type, so it makes a difference what she thinks. She says straight up, like I said in the title, yes, it was a coup attempt, and here's why. What Trump tried is called a self-coup, and we, I think, used the other terminology for it, the international terminology for it of auto golpe, right? Which, that's about what it means. And let's see, and he did it in slow motion and in plain sight, she says, and that matters too. Reintroducing her at the top of this piece. It's published in Politico, as I said, back in January. Fiona Hill served as deputy assistant to the president, that would be Trump, and senior director for European and Russian affairs on the National Security Council from 2017 to 2019. She is currently a senior fellow in the Center on the United States and Europe at the Brookings Institution. But you'll all remember her and her rather dramatic testimony from the first impeachment proceedings. She begins this way. Since last Wednesday, people have been arguing what to call what happened at the U.S. Capitol. Was it a riot, an uprising, an insurrection? I like to use insurgency because we got used to that term in Iraq and elsewhere. I've been public in calling it a coup, but others disagree. Some have said it's not a coup because the U.S. military and other armed groups weren't involved. Well, there were some armed groups, but not good ones or real ones. And some because Donald Trump didn't invoke his presidential powers in support of the mob that broke into the Capitol. Others point out that no one has claimed or proved that there was a secret plan directed by the president and that Trump's efforts to overturn the outcome of the 2020 presidential election could never have succeeded in the first place. Well, we just heard a little bit about that. These observations are based on the idea that a coup is a sudden, violent seizure of power involving clandestine plots and military takeovers. By contrast, Trump's goal was to keep himself in power, and his actions were taken over a period of months and in slow motion. But that doesn't mean it wasn't a coup attempt. Trump disguised what he was doing by operating in plain sight, talking openly about his intent. He normalized his actions so people would accept them. I've been studying authoritarian regimes for 3 decades, and I know the signs of a coup when I see them. Technically, what Trump attempted is what's known as a self-coup, and Trump isn't the first leader to try it. Charles Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, nephew, of course, of the first Napoleon, pulled one off in France in December of 1851 to stay in power beyond his term. Then he declared himself emperor, Napoleon III. More recently, Nicolas Maduro perpetrated a self-coup in Venezuela after losing the 2017 elections. And don't we remember that Trump thought that was awful? The storming of the Capitol building on January 6th was the culmination of a series of actions and events taken or instigated by Trump so he could retain the presidency that together amount to an attempt at a self-coup. This was not a one-off or a brief episode. Trump declared election fraud immediately on November 4th, even while the votes were still being counted. He sought to recount and rerun the election so that he and not Joe Biden was the winner. In Turkey in 2015, President Erdogan successfully did the same thing. He had called elections to strengthen his presidency, but his party lost its majority in the parliament. He challenged the results in the courts, marginalized the opposition, and forced what he blatantly called a rerun election. He tried again in the Istanbul mayoral election in 2019, but was thwarted. There's a standard coup checklist that analysts use to evaluate coups, and we can use it to assess Trump's moves to prevent the peaceful transfer of executive power. To successfully usurp or hold power, you need to control the military and paramilitary units, communications, the judiciary, government institutions, and the legislature, and mobilize popular support. So let's see how well this applies to what Trump has done. The military, under that heading, during the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests, Trump drew Joint Chiefs Chair General Mark Milley and Defense Secretary Mark Esper out of a White House meeting to follow him for a provocative photo op in front of a historic church. Paramilitary forces under the president's command cleared a passage for his group across Lafayette Square. This is a very interesting, it's factually true, but just an interesting spin on it that makes you see it in a slightly different light. Trump was testing the military and the Pentagon to see if he could turn the U.S. Armed Forces into his own Praetorian Guard. Oh boy, that's probably true. The blowback from this episode emphasized the non-political position of the U.S. military, but there was sufficient lingering concern that just days before January 6th, 10 former defense secretaries, including Esper, who had been forced out of his office for insufficient loyalty by that point, just 6 months later, felt compelled to issue an unprecedented public letter reminding Defense Department officials of their oath to uphold the Constitution. That's a good point. I think we were aware of it, but I think that put a finer point on an already good point. There's a couple other points that she makes here. Maybe we'll share those on the other side of this quick 2-minute break.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Yeah, just checking in on comments. So yeah, it doesn't seem like a whole lot of you were roused by the Facebook outage. Ricky was saying she didn't even know there was one until it was over. I could easily have skipped over the whole thing too, just because I just never use it, never visit. But I saw everybody talking about it on Twitter, and it was so that's it. That's how I found out about it. Okay, let's see. I wanted to continue with Fiona Hill's view of this thing. And I know it is an old article. Of course, we probably, even if we did read it, we need to refresh our memory of these things now that the January 6th investigation is underway. And since we continue to hear from Republicans denials that it was anything even remotely like a coup, and it's worth reminding ourselves of the technical definition and the various ways in which Trump's efforts approached making it a reality. You know, it's obviously a priority for those investigating, and Greg Sargent does well to remind us of it. So what else did she have lined up for discussion? We just covered the military, and she did remind us that what was actually happening here was the paramilitary forces. Remember, he called in the Bureau of Prisons and their guards. It was unclear who he could force to appear on the streets as enforcers, but he found a way to get some bodies out there, and they, did in fact, exercise some They overstepped their boundaries in exercising crowd control powers, obviously, and then they did it to clear the path for Trump for this big photo op. I mean, it was a pretty significant thing. I don't know if we understood exactly how significant it was that he could create a paramilitary force from out of nowhere and do that. So the next area that experts usually focus on when evaluating a coup is communications. At least that's the one she named next. In the old days, she says, coup plotters would seize the Central Telegraph or Post Office and later radio and TV towers. Trump put a loyalist in charge of the Post Office. He did not take TV and radio by storm, but he discredited the mainstream media that was critical of his actions as the enemy of the people and recruited or pressured Fox News, Newsmax, OAN, and social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook into participants in his efforts to sway public opinion in his favor. Twitter, in essence, was Trump's equivalent of the TV and radio tower. He directly messaged the 88 million people who followed his account. He used social media and cable news to propagate false, self-serving narratives, reinforce messages to provide justification for his actions, and mobilize his supporters. Well put. How about the judiciary? With the help of Republican lawmakers, Trump stacked federal courts with what he kept calling his judges. He successfully pushed through the appointments of 3 new Supreme Court justices ahead of the presidential election. He made his expectation clear that if the Supreme Court had to settle an election dispute, then, quote, his justices would tilt the verdict in his favor. Erdogan did the same in Turkey, purging the judiciary and installing loyalists who facilitated his rerun of the 2015 election and sentenced political opponents to long prison terms. Trump frequently called for investigations into his opponents and for courts and law enforcement to, quote, lock them all up. Of course, that never happened, thankfully, and he faces the same now, but you know how we are about enforcing the law in this country against people in suits. Government institutions is next. As in Turkey, Trump purged cabinet members and career officials who resisted him. He bypassed Congress and installed acting officials in crucial national security positions like they would be the acting director of national intelligence and the acting secretaries of defense and homeland security. So some pretty key positions. He made it crystal clear that personal loyalty was the primary factor for candidate selection. He removed Esper after he lost the election. Attorney General William Barr resigned in the same period amid rumors that he would be sacked for failing to declare massive election fraud. Trump wanted officials in place in January 2021 who were entirely beholden to him and likely to support his efforts to stay in power. In the legislature, finally, Trump usurped the Republican Party. He claimed more than 74 million who voted for him last November as his personal base, his popular support. He threatened to destroy the careers of Republican members of Congress who did not favor overturning the election result. At the January 6th rally preceding the storming of the Capitol, Donald Trump Jr. even referred to the GOP as the Trump Republican Party. In the end, even after the Capitol was seized by Trump's violent mob, 147 Republican members of Congress, led by Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, did endorse some of Trump's efforts to challenge the election results and overturn the constitutional order. So did Senators Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, and 6 other politically ambitious senators who wanted to tap into Trump's popular support. In this way, Trump's control of the legislature and a significant popular mandate was almost within his reach. The truth is that for the past 4 years, Trump has been stress testing the U.S. democratic system to see if anyone will rein him in. Consider how many times he stated that he deserved 2 or even 3 terms in office because he was treated unfairly or cheated out of the first 2 years of his presidency by the Russia hoax, the Mueller investigation, and last year's impeachment trial. Throughout 2020, when his poll ratings faltered, the president laid the groundwork for what would become the big lie that he won the election. And this is January 11th, that she's using like the capitalized, the big lie. He said in advance that the ballot was, quote, rigged, and that he could lose only if they stole the election. They was a domestic enemy that he manufactured in broad strokes for his grassroots base to rise up against. Democrats, liberals, globalists, radical socialists, communists, Antifa, leftists, the Black Lives Matter movement, the mainstream media, George Soros, various other boogeymen and women, deep state bureaucrats, and even congressional Republicans whom he labeled rhinos and never Trumpers. After the election was declared in favor of Biden, great day, I remember it well, Trump refused to concede. He never stopped lying about the outcome to his base and the rest of America. Just reminiscing that I was on hand to jeer at him as he left the golf course the day they called it for Biden. It was great fun. He deployed Rudy Giuliani and his legal team to contest every single post-election juncture. He harangued state election officials in phone calls, threatened more than harangued, and in person to intimidate them into repudiating or even changing the vote tallies. He told Vice President Mike Pence to block the formal election certification process in Congress, which was beyond his constitutional authority. This she identifies on the 11th already. When Pence refused, Trump rallied thousands of his supporters to stop the steal, in quotes there, of course, on Capitol Hill. So, what thwarted Trump's slow-motion, in-plain-sight attempt at a self-coup? Fortunately, there was pushback from all the key institutions you need for a coup. First, the military and other parts of government resisted Trump's efforts to personalize their power. Second, major media outlets reported the facts truthfully. Social media outlets flagged the president's lies about the election, albeit belatedly. And Twitter and Facebook ultimately cut off his accounts. Third, the judiciary and courts held firm. Trump judges, all the way up to the Supreme Court, respected their oath of office and rejected the president's appeals to overturn legitimate election results. Fourth, state and local government officials refused to be swayed. They repeatedly called out the lie that Trump had won the election. Finally, in the legislature, the vice president performed his constitutional role, and as did the Republican Senate Majority Leader and most of the Senate. The only two elements that rallied behind the president's coup attempt were the handful of senators and the majority of House Republicans and his popular support in the form of an insurgency, the mob that stormed the Capitol. There's my word, insurgency. The good news for the United States is that Trump's self-coup failed. The bad news is that his supporters still believe the false narrative, the big lie that he won the election. He's still working on that one. Trump has not repudiated it, nor have the House and Senate Republicans who voted against the Electoral College results. Millions of people still think the election was stolen. They still support Trump, the person, not the Republican Party, and many are prepared to take further action on his behalf. As in the case of other coup attempts, the president's actions have put us on the brink of civil war. Trump did not overturn the election results, but just as he intended, he disrupted the peaceful democratic transition of executive power. Unless the big lie is thoroughly refuted, and I would argue he ends up at the end of a rope, we can expect more attempts to subvert the constitutional order from Trump's supporters, and we still have to get through the January 20th inauguration. Well, we did get through that, thankfully. The president's actions and his falsehoods have shattered America's democratic norms, exacerbated its political divisions, and put people's lives at risk. 5 people died during the events surrounding the storming of the Capitol, including a member of the U.S. Capitol Police Force. Many of the members of Congress who backed Trump's efforts were themselves put at risk of injury or death. If we are to restore democratic norms and make sure that this does not happen again, these congressional Republicans will have to take personal responsibility for their actions, that hasn't happened, in support of Trump's coup attempt. So what happens if they don't? They must tell the truth to their constituents about the election and what the president tried to do in January of 2021. They owe it to the people they represent as well as to the country they serve. Well, they didn't, and they won't, so I guess you might ask follow-up questions of Fiona if you had a chance to talk to her at some point. If you get to corner her, let us know and let us know what she had to say about that. All right. What else have we got here that I thought might be of some interest? Oh, well, just noting for the record that, let's see, Hillary Clinton, I guess, has gone on the record about getting rid of the filibuster. So that seems cool. Who's reporting this? It's a Substack. Steve Beschloss reporting this one. Hillary Clinton doesn't mince words. She was dead right in 2016, and she's dead right now about our democracy's existential crisis. I won't read through the whole thing, although it doesn't look all that long. But it was pretty interesting to see that she, like the New York Times editorial board, was now being explicit about position on ending the filibuster, or at least conditionally. Another item that has otherwise escaped notice on our show, though we've brought up the possibility and then, in fact, later on the near certitude that, near certainty anyway, our certitude about the certainty, about who were the provocateurs who most prominently displayed a willingness to inflict wanton damage on police stations and business locations during the protests, either the various Black Lives Matter protests, etc. And as it turns out, yes, it was very often white supremacist interlopers dressed to arouse the suspicion that they were, in fact, Black Bloc, Antifa types. And we've known that to be the case for some time now at this point. But now we have a guilty plea at last. Let's see what I put away here. NPR News, NPR, but this time Minnesota. A Texas man, of all people, can you believe it? Admits shooting at the Minneapolis police station during riot. Matt Sepich, or Sepich perhaps, S-E-P-I-C, reporting at the end of the month, last Thursday, September 30th, a man who had been part of a far-right group that wants to foment a civil war, it's the Boogaloo Boys, admitted in federal court Thursday that he traveled to Minneapolis from the San Antonio area, out-of-state agitators, for real, to sow chaos after the police murder of George Floyd. Ivan Harrison Hunter, just happened to be named Ivan, I don't know why, 24 years old, of Boerne, Texas, B-O-E-R-N-E, Boerne, perhaps, pleaded guilty to a single count of rioting. Okay. The charge carries a maximum prison term of 5 years. Assistant U.S. Attorney Andrew Winter said sentencing guidelines call for Hunter to serve between 37 and 46 months in federal prison. U.S. District Judge Michael Davis said he would schedule a sentencing hearing following a standard pre-sentence investigation. Hunter admitted that he fired 13 rounds from an AK-47 style rifle into the 3rd Precinct Police Station on May 28, 2020, as other rioters looted and set fire to the building after police evacuated. No one was struck by the gunfire. After shooting at the building, Hunter was recorded on video high-fiving another person and yelling, "Justice for Floyd." Investigators matched the skull mask Hunter was wearing in the video to a photo on his Facebook page. Prosecutors say Hunter came to Minneapolis in the days following Floyd's murder after corresponding on Facebook with Michael Solomon of New Brighton, Minnesota, and Benjamin Teeter of Hampstead, North Carolina. The men had been part of the Boogaloo Boys, a group that exploits tensions to further violence. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, the group represents itself as libertarian and race-blind and calls for armed insurrection against what they see as government tyranny. But the SPLC says the Boogaloo Boys' origins are violently racist. The group emerged online early in the last decade, and Boogaloo, you remember, was associated with a call for race war. The term is often used by white nationalists and those seeking to generate chaos. You remember the stupid origins of Boogaloo. That being, this would be the Second Civil War, or Civil War II, Electric Boogaloo. You get the idea. Anyway, just thought I'd bring that up because, in terms of getting some closure on it, everybody suspected that that was the case, and now we, I guess, have a guilty plea on it. So that's it. Closed. Let's see. What other fun things do I have in pocket that need to be excavated? Yes, right. I mentioned to you that there's a little more development on the John Durham case falling apart. And I mentioned to you that there was a piece in the New York Times about the server issue that underlay that. I was wondering whether we might be in position to share some of that in the last couple minutes before the top of the hour break. Let's try that one. Maybe I'll use this as an intro to it. I think Jonathan Chait kind of summarized things for us, having had the benefit of the Charlie Savage New York Times article about the server issue behind him. Might save us some time on this one, but this appeared in New York Magazine also on September 30th. Durham's attempt to discredit Trump's enemies is falling apart. We knew that, but I think Jonathan Chait will give us a better view of how that was happening. Trump's prosecutor omitted key evidence from his indictment, as it turns out. When Donald Trump's attorney general appointed John Durham to investigate what Trump insisted was a deep state conspiracy against him, a question hovered. What exactly was Durham thinking? Durham had a respectable resume as a prosecutor and a career that did not seem to lead straight into a role as Trump's Roy Cohn. Was he simply accepting the role out of diligence and the understanding that if he found no crimes, he could put Trump's absurd charges to rest? Or, unlikely but possible, would he uncover real proof of a criminal conspiracy at the FBI to undermine Trump? Or had Durham undergone the same Fox News-induced brain melt that has turned figures like Barr, Giuliani, and many others into authoritarian conspiracy theorists? In the wake of Durham's first and perhaps only indictment, we can safely rule out the first two explanations. Durham's indictment does not even allege that the FBI committed any wrongdoing. Instead, it charges that the FBI was lied to by Michael Sussman, a lawyer who passed on leads about Trump's ties to Russia that the Bureau was unable to verify. Durham's indictment claims Sussman committed perjury by denying he was working for the Clinton campaign at the time he brought the information about Trump to the FBI in 2016. We did get this from the earlier reporting. The first weakness in the indictment is that even if every word Durham writes is true, the charge he has amounts to a very, very small molehill. Interested parties uncover crimes all the time. There's just no reason to believe that Sussman's relationship with a law firm working for Clinton would have made any difference to the FBI, which was already investigating Trump's ties to Russia and which wound up discarding Sussman's lead anyway as a dry hole. Second, the evidence that Sussman lied to the FBI is extremely shaky. As Benjamin Wittes notes, boom, right? The sole basis for charging Sussman with perjury is the reconciliation, I got that on my mind, but the recollection by FBI official Jim Baker. Baker testified to Congress that he remembered very little about his conversation with Sussman. And the transcript reprinted here reads, Baker saying in that first interaction, I don't remember him specifically saying he was acting on behalf of a particular client. And he's asked by, who's asking the questions here? Jim Jordan, maybe? Jordan, it says. Did you know at the time that he was representing the DNC in the Clinton campaign? Baker says again, I can't remember. I learned that at some point. I don't think, as I said last time, I don't specifically remember when I learned that. So I don't know that I had that in my head when he showed up in my office. I just can't remember. Jordan asks again, did you learn that shortly thereafter if you didn't know it at the time? And Baker still, I wish I could give you a better answer. I just don't remember. That's pretty annoying, I'm sure, to them. Yes, the Jordan who dug out the evidence that seems likely to undermine Durham's case is Trump superfan Jim Jordan. Wittes concludes, it's hard for me to understand how a criminal case against Sussman can proceed in the face of this testimony. The perjury charge is merely the window dressing in the indictment. The meat of it, the part that has Trump defenders excited, is a narrative laid out by Durham attempting to paint Sussman and the experts he worked with as liars who smeared Trump. That narrative part does not describe actual crimes, of course. Prosecutors can write whatever they want in their indictment. This one is like a Sean Hannity monologue wrapped around a parking ticket. And even the speaking indictment portion of Durham's charge is falling apart now. Today, both CNN and the New York Times reported that Durham selectively quoted from emails in order to furnish a completely misleading impression that Sussman's researchers lied. The story here is that a group of computer scientists discovered evidence of communications between a Russian bank server and a Trump property. Right? That's the Alpha Bank thing. The computer scientists suspected, but weren't certain, the server might be used for some form of communication between Trump's campaign and Russia. The reason they suspected this, of course, was the broad swath of shady behavior Trump exhibited towards Russia. Durham's indictment asserts that the computer scientists knew the data was innocent but sent it to the FBI anyway. A little bit like Trump's campaign knowing that the big lie was a big lie, but asserting it anyway. But this is different somehow. Anyway, Durham's, the Times and CNN reported that, what they reported today is that Durham supported this charge by clipping misleading segments of emails by the scientists when other emails undermined his accusation. That's interesting. CNN reports it this way. Durham's indictment also portrays researchers working with Rodney Joffe, Joffe, as harboring doubts about whether the Trump Alpha Bank information was anything other than innocuous email traffic. But the indictment cites snippets of sentences from emails, leaving out further discussion among the researchers that appears to show they firmly believed the Trump Alpha Bank connection was suspicious and needed to be investigated. The indictment cites one email conversation in which one of the researchers suggests narrowly tailoring their findings to make a plausible case that there was something worth investigating about Trump and Alpha Bank. The rest of the email, left out by prosecutors in the indictment, continues, if the white paper intends to say that here are communications, or I guess they meant there are communications between at least Alpha and Trump, which are intentionally being hidden by Alpha and Trump, I absolutely believe that is the case, according to the email reviewed by CNN. And they report elsewhere in the indictment, Durham quotes an email sent to Joffe and others involved in the effort in which one of the researchers wrote, let's for a moment think of the best case scenario where we are able to show somehow that DNS communication exists between Trump and Russia. How do we plan to defend the criticism that this is not spoofed traffic we are observing? There is no answer to that. But additional emails reviewed by CNN appear to show that after expressing their skepticism in late August 2016, the researchers expanded the scope of their research and believed they should show their findings to the FBI. The Times has more examples of Durham taking messages out of context, such as the indictment quotes August emails from Ms. April Lorenzen and Mr. Manos Antonakakis. I think I've got that right. Worrying that they might not know if someone had faked the DNS data. But people familiar with the matter said the indictment omitted later discussion of reasons to doubt any attempt to spoof the overall patterns could go undetected. And even another from the Times. The indictment says Mr. Joffe sent an email on August 21st urging more research about Mr. Trump, which he stated could give the base of a very useful narrative, while also expressing a belief that the Trump server at issue was a red herring and they should ignore it because it could have been used by the mass marketing company. I'm not certain what that refers to, but the full email provides some context. Mr. Trump had claimed he had no dealings with Russia, and yet many links appeared to exist. Joffe noted, citing an article that discussed aspirations to build a Trump Tower in Moscow. Despite the red herring line, the same email also showed that Mr. Joffe nevertheless remained suspicious about Alpha Bank, proposing a deeper hunt in the data for the anomalies that we believe exist. Whatever the truth is of the Alpha Bank matter, the Times reports that the computer scientists still don't feel satisfied that they know the answer. Durham's case that the scientists knew they were lying is simply a preposterous smear. Durham's indictment of Sussman seems extremely unlikely to result in a prosecution. The rest of it is a story about dishonesty, but the dishonesty lies on the part of Durham himself. His indictment proves only the willingness of many members of the right-wing legal establishment to corruptly put their powers at the disposal of a liar. And here we mean Donald J. Trump. That's the liar we happen to be talking about. So I think that actually kind of summarizes the most salient parts of Chris Savage's article, which is, of course, long and detailed. And I think that now brings us up to speed on where that is. We haven't heard anything for like 2 weeks about any movement forward on the Durham case. So yeah, I don't know whether we ever will. Okay, let's see. Coming up on our top of the hour break here, and I was wondering, I want to at least make mention of, if not read aloud, another September 30th entry here. Margaret Sullivan actually wrote a piece for the Washington Post on the Eastman memo, and I think we've done that, already at this point. But it was interesting watching her give her take on it and writing about it from a media criticism point of view, under the headline of "A Trump Lawyer," that's Eastman, "wrote an instruction manual for a coup. Why haven't you seen it on the news?" I mean, you may not have noticed that. Maybe you did notice. Maybe you noticed other people talking about it. I've certainly seen people talking about it. But everywhere I look, there's plenty of news about it. But I guess in terms of, turning on the 6 o'clock local news when they cover national or world stuff, were they just not discussing the Eastman memo? Was it somehow too complex for them? I'm curious about what your experience has been with that. But Margaret Sullivan had some things to say about that. I want to at least acknowledge that she weighed in on the subject, even if we don't get to reading through her piece. All right, taking a 1-minute break, reassess things as we enter into the second hour, and only about half an hour away from hearing from Joan. Very exciting. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Woo-wee. All right. Here's one that I didn't get to read at the time that it came out, but I know if I scroll far enough back in the KITM hashtag column, I will find the tweet trying to bring it to my attention. One of the, I don't know, it was like maybe end of last week. But I thought I would bring it up. Let me let's at least open that up. Oh, but before I do get to that, since I was scrolling back, I mentioned to you that Patrick Snyder had sent us this rather speculative thread. The thread is the work of Tomi, T-O-M-I, Tomi Ahonen, A-H-O-N-E-N, with whom I am not familiar, but in reading the profile, I didn't get anywhere with this. So it seems like a high volume verified account, but I don't know how wise the verification necessarily was. But he is who he says he is anyway, I guess. But yeah, this strikes me as a very speculative thread and sensationalist thread that I don't know we can really back up. But it does start off with something that I think is of some interest, which is, the headline for it, I think, too speculative. Update summary on the 5 paths to prison for Trump. Well, yeah, that's, I hope for it, but, endlessly. But I do think it's pretty unlikely. However, this is a pretty good reminder of some key cases that will certainly darken Trump's mood, if not actually send him to prison. First being the Allen Weisselberg trials, now underway under the authority of the Manhattan DA, looking into his New York state taxes. Second, a federal investigation of Rudy Giuliani for his role in the Ukraine nightmare. Third, Matt Gaetz still comes up. Of course, federal investigation. And in this regard, Tommy here thinks that that this case leads to a federal investigation of allegations that Trump was outright selling presidential pardons at the end of his term. Gates couldn't secure one for whatever reason, but apparently that discussion was there. That offer was out there. And I think it came to him through Roger Stone, who is listed as number 4 here, but listed not for that, but rather for January 6th involvement, that he too may find himself in legal jeopardy. I mean, he was pardoned for other things, but then he went and committed this crime, so that's going to be tough. Plus, of course, he could come up on D.C. charges instead. And the speculation is that he would flip to avoid going to prison. And finally, 5th, good reminder that Tom Barrack, under federal investigation for his undisclosed lobbying ties to the United Arab Emirates. So, whether or not they really have any chance of leading to prison is debatable, but I thought a good reminder and summary of what it is that Tommy, whoever that is, sees in each of these cases as being the salient points. First being Alan Weisselberg, now being criminally prosecuted, has had his first court date, and we discovered prosecutors found more evidence against him, which means that someone had probably flipped and provided that evidence. And Alan's own attorneys expect more criminal charges. The next court date, though, isn't until January, so we have to sit and wait and see what happens with that one. Second was the bombshell revelation in the Weisselberg case that there is a Donald Trump general ledger somewhere that was kept, which lists Trump's tax fraud, which, again, are you taking notes on a criminal conspiracy? You probably shouldn't do that. This means that Trump cannot escape by blaming Weisselberg of being an incompetent accountant, and somehow Trump is the victim in all this. I don't recall having heard about this, but were it the case, well, you know, it still doesn't inexorably lead to prison for Trump, but it doesn't look good. Giuliani, I'm reminded, and I think this is the case, right? Giuliani's case is with a special master reviewing the evidence seized from the FBI raid of his home and office, which, of course, he claimed was all protected attorney-client work product and privileged. And they're sorting that out, and apparently that work is almost done, and we'll know the result, and then we'll start to see what's being uncovered. There was one dispute about some last files that was decided by the judge against Rudy, so he's not doing well in that. Then the Ukraine situation, the special master is nearly done reviewing all of that stuff. When she hands final evidence to prosecutors a few days after that, the prediction is that they would, Tomy's prediction, that they would actually arrest Rudy. And they're speculating that happens this October, which is now. So that's also the sort of thing that makes you say, another Supreme Court marshals type speculation? I don't know. But there's a lot speculated about timelines in here too. Matt Gaetz, of course, that investigation, I guess, continues. And I haven't heard much about this, but it was certainly discussed in the early going that there was the possibility that Gaetz was trying to negotiate for a pardon, and what leverage would Matt Gaetz have had to get a pardon like that? Loyalty wouldn't have been enough. It just hasn't been long enough. He hasn't done much of anything. So cash, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see whether that actually progresses anyway. I haven't heard much about it, but they're saying, this one is going to take some time to unravel. It does also speculate here that the Matt Gaetz rape trial, it says, will lead to Roger Stone and Jared Kushner, both of whom would flip against Trump. I don't know how it involves Kushner, but I guess as part of the bribes for pardons idea, that Stone was Gaetz's connection to the inside of Trump world, where that, if it was going to happen anywhere, it was going to happen there, and Stone would be that connection. And I guess the thinking is that he was running it through Jared, but I don't know that I see that alleged very often. Let's say that. It turns out, though, that Gates's friend, the tax assessor down there, Joel Greenberg, the guy who seems to have been the epicenter of the trafficking scheme down there, he was originally given 30 days to, reach his plea deal and to give up his evidence on everybody else. But apparently he knew of so many other crimes, it says here, that he was given an extra 90 days to spill all he knows, and that is what accounts for the delay. Again, maybe, I don't know that I've actually seen that reported anywhere, and there's no links here, so it's kind of troublesome. However, let's see. It is a federal investigation. He's reminding us that Governor DeSantis can't pardon Gates on federal charges, but I guess some state charges could exist. Let's see. Stone is, it says here, among the first of the January 6th planners to get caught, because several of his Oath Keeper pals who were caught in the January 6th riot and have been since arrested, they have has confessed, and at least 2, possibly 4, are testifying to the FBI against Roger Stone. So we'll see whether that brings anything. He too, Tomey thinks, will be arrested shortly. That would be fantastic, but it just so rarely goes that way. And then again, the reminder that Tom Barrack still in trouble. That we know about, and that appears to be true. So anyway, good reminder of the various other terrible things still hanging out there for Trump that he's going to have to burn whatever money he can get his hands on to defend against. Okay. Switching gears, something that, like I said, was brought to my attention a while back, and I don't know. I don't think I scrolled far enough back yet to remember who it was. Oh, you know what? Maybe I could do a search that way, and search the KITM hashtag and see if we can come up with it this way, because I have to sort them by latest too. Oh, you know how Twitter loves to do them by top things. All right, well, no, I don't think it's coming up that way. Anyway, the story is, and now we can see if we can figure out, well, one of you can jump up and claim it, but I think it was one of our regular suggesters of topics, whether it was Rebecca Romans or possibly, let's see, who else might have been. I don't think it was Patrick. But, well, anyway, you can jump up and claim it if it was yours. But a story, more information about the weirdo millionaire businessman pals that Trump kept ensconced in Mar-a-Lago, Pervalago, of course, and their determination to run the Department of Veterans Affairs from down there in Florida. Remember, we've discussed this in the past. And ProPublica has taken another look at this and had some more information on it. Let me bring up the original and read a little bit through it, because I thought we should get up to speed on that. Probably something we shouldn't lose sight of. Trump's Mar-a-Lago buddies tried to get the VA to sell access to veterans' medical records. You knew that there was a business angle in this somewhere. It was weird and probably illegal enough that these three were trying to actually run the VA, like, for the benefit of veterans. That was problematic all by itself, but at least, you know, I guess they would have argued at the time, well, we're trying to help veterans. But you might wonder why they were willing to put in so much time from down in Florida on this stuff, and the answer is because they were smuggling stuff out the back door to resell. There's the answer. A congressional investigation prompted by ProPublica's reporting found Trump's Mar-a-Lago crowd, wealthy civilians with no U.S. government or military experience, pursued a plan to monetize veterans' medical data. There you go. That's our answer. I think Isaac Arnsdorf is the reporter for this one, published a little while ago, September 27th. Former President Donald Trump empowered associates from his private club to pursue a plan for the Department of Veterans Affairs to monetize patient data, according to documents newly released by congressional investigators. As ProPublica first reported in 2018, a trio based at Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort weighed in on policy and personnel decisions for the federal government's second largest agency, despite lacking any experience in the U.S. government or military. While previous reporting showed the trio had a hand in budgeting and contracting, their interests in turning patient data into a revenue stream was not previously known. The VA provides medical care to more than 9 million veterans at more than 1,000 facilities across the country. Patient data is, in my opinion, the most valuable asset the VA has, a consultant said in June of 2017 in an email released Monday by Democrats on the House Oversight Committee. It can be leveraged into hundreds of millions in revenue by selling access to major companies, he said. The consultant, Terry Fadem, F-A-D-E-M, ran a private nonprofit for Bruce Moskowitz, a West Palm Beach, Florida physician who was one of the 3 Trump associates given sweeping influence over the VA, known to officials as the Mar-a-Lago crowd, because that's who they were. In response to Fadem's email, Moskowitz told then VA Secretary David Shulkin that he had discussed the plan with interested companies, including Johnson & Johnson, CVS, and Apple. Oh no. Shulkin replied that he liked the idea, according to the documents. Senior officials scrambled to hire Fadem as a contractor, the emails show, but it's not clear whether his contract was awarded. I don't know how you can't get to the bottom of that, but okay. I am working on trying to understand why and where his contract is stuck. Poonam Alai, I guess, A-L-A-I-G-H, then the agency's top health official, said in a June 2017 email. I agree, having him on board as soon as possible will be critical. The documents do not show what became of the plan or whether the VA ever sold access to patient data, nor do the records include evidence that Moskowitz or the other Mar-a-Lago associates were in a position to profit personally. Oh, really? That'd be amazing if that were actually the case. It's just the case that the evidence isn't there yet. But I guess it's always possible they were just being altruistic. Or, that they thought that the VA's budget could be supplemented by the sales, and that may also benefit them in some way, but it would be a lot less direct. A spokesman for the trio said, as far as they know, Fadem was not hired, and the VA never acted on the licensing idea. We were asked repeatedly by former Secretary Shulkin and his senior staff, as well as by the president, to assist the VA, and that is what we sought to do, period. The 3 said in a statement. Shulkin, Ally, Trump's office, the VA, Johnson & Johnson, CVS, and Apple did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Fadem died in 2019, so they're not getting anywhere with him. What if it was COVID? The latest revelation helps complete the picture of the Mar-a-Lago triumvirate's extensive influence over Trump's agenda for veterans, a signature issue of his 2016 campaign. ProPublica's revelations about the men's day-to-day involvement prompted investigations by congressional committees and the Government Accountability Office, as well as a court challenge. House Oversight Committee Chairwoman Carolyn Maloney and House Veterans Affairs Committee Chair Mark Takano said in a statement on Monday, a while back, that the documents show that the secret role the trio played in developing VA initiatives and programs, including a hugely profitable plan to monetize veterans' medical records, Ike Perlmutter, Mark Sherman, and Dr. Bruce Moskowitz, bolstered by their connection to President Trump's private Mar-a-Lago club, violated the law and sought to exert improper influence over government officials to further their own personal interests, the chair said. Perlmutter, Sherman, and Moskowitz have previously said they obtained no personal benefits, had no official role, and exercised no formal authority. I'm sure none of it was official or formal. But the newly released documents show that they did view themselves as an official advisory committee and disregarded repeated warnings that they needed to comply with a Watergate-era transparency law, of course. As the president asked, we can now formally create an official committee. Perlmutter, the group's leader and chairman of Marvel Entertainment, wrote in a February 2017 email after a meeting with Trump. Perlmutter is a Mar-a-Lago member and one of Trump's biggest political donors. He went so far as to rebuke White House staff for holding discussions without him. How dare you? I am shocked and extremely disappointed with the manner in which you have engaged in individual communications with Apple and intentionally excluded our broader team of subject matter experts, which they're not. Perlmutter said in a March 2017 email to White House aides, "I understand that these backdoor discussions have apparently been occurring almost daily for weeks, and you have not told anyone and refused to return phone calls and emails." And that's because you're in Florida and you're not an official person in this government. But official advisory committees are governed by the Federal Advisory Committee Act, the 1972 law known as FACA, but not by very many people, I guess, requires federal agencies to inform the public when they consult outside experts. Administration officials repeatedly told the Mar-a-Lago trio that they would have to comply with the law. The law compels advisory committees to represent a range of views and disclose their activities to the public. It appears FACA may be implicated, a VA lawyer said in a January 2017 email that Shulkin shared with Moskowitz. That April, White House aide Reed Cordish told Perlmutter directly, "You will need to form a FACA group." But Perlmutter demurred, replying, "We have been advised that FACA does not apply because we are not a formal group in any way." Well, you're wrong. Instead, the group took efforts to conceal its activities, documents show. "We are still unsure what can be put in emails and what to discuss verbally," Moskowitz wrote to Shulkin in February of 2017. Never a good sign. The group's spokesman maintained they weren't a formal committee and said complying with FACA was the agency's responsibility. In March of 2021, a federal appeals court in Washington held that a liberal veterans group could proceed with a lawsuit to enforce FACA's disclosure requirements around the Mar-a-Lago trio. So that's where that stands. Relatively good news, but yeah, I guess no evidence yet, it's worth stressing, that they personally profited from it. It's just very difficult to imagine that they would have been motivated to do anything unless there were a way for them to personally profit from it. So, I guess we'll wait and see what develops. Okay, let's see. A few more minutes here before our bottom of the hour break. Stories that we might be able to share in just a few minutes. I note for the record anyway that there was news yesterday that Ron DeSantis, whose name came up in the context of possibly pardoning either Matt Gaetz or, for that matter, Roger Stone for whatever activity might have taken place in Florida. But Ron DeSantis's wife apparently making the announcement yesterday of her diagnosis with breast cancer. Unclear as of my discovery of that news yesterday exactly what's going on, and she doesn't really have to disclose any more than I guess she didn't even have to disclose that, but she did, and makes some sense, and it'll make a difference in in a number of things. I wondered actually, aside from saying, we're not angry at Ron DeSantis' wife, right? Speedy recovery to her. And, we generally don't conduct our politics by saying, well, I hope that person's wife gets cancer. So, okay, that can be off the table at the very least. But, yeah, I did have some related thoughts about it. I wondered whether, for instance, I'm curious about what the nature of the cancer is, only insofar, I don't want to violate her privacy or anything, but only insofar as I'm wondering whether it will require treatment that would leave her immunocompromised, which is a bad thing to be in the COVID era in general, but also a bad thing to be if you're married to a governor who's also married to Trumpism in the face of the pandemic, and who's kind of anti-mask and kind of anti-vaccine, even though he hedges on all those things. I was curious whether the nature of whatever treatment she got might teach him the importance of masking up. That would be nice. Sometimes that's what it takes to move Republicans to action. They learn that, actually someone who's close and important to me has reason to ask that we all protect her by more consistently and more properly and more faithfully masking when we're around her and when we return from being with crowds outside the house. It doesn't necessarily mean wearing a mask around that person all the time. Not necessarily. There are some cases, though, where that would be wise, and people are particularly fragile when immunocompromised by chemotherapy and radiation therapy, etc. And in the middle or on our way into cold and flu season, it would be wise because it doesn't all have to be about COVID. Somebody was giving me some pushback in the comments about that yesterday, that if they're both vaccinated, and I think that they both are, despite the fact that he hasn't been big on pushing the vaccines. He hasn't been, he hasn't said the vaccines don't work. He's just not doing his part in pushing vaccination as hard as he could, and instead pushing Regeneron because that way he can be Trumpy about it. But, of course, you can have breakthrough infections as well. So a breakthrough infection of Delta variant that gets by your vaccination and is carried home where you have an already immunocompromised cancer patient living, depending on what kind of treatment she's going through and how severe things are, it could pose a pretty serious problem. Yes, you might have to mask at home, or you just might have to be extra careful, wash your hands a lot, and not necessarily do that. But I guess someone in a job like governor of Florida who's going to have a lot of public contact, you may really end up having to mask a lot of the time while you're at home. I don't know why that was such a troublesome point for people. It may very well be that, yes, she's diagnosed with breast cancer and is very lucky to have caught it almost immediately, and it will be removed and dealt with surgically and might not involve. I don't really know whether you can avoid it entirely, but maybe you can. I don't know what's new and what sort of cancer they've discovered, but it's possible that she won't find herself immunocompromised, and Ron DeSantis will learn absolutely nothing from the event. That's entirely possible. Okay, so I just wanted to mention that and get that on the record as well. Let's see. Any other things that I think we ought to try and sneak in if I scroll all the way back? Let's see. There have been a couple other members of Congress in the last couple of days, unfortunately, having to announce that they too have contracted COVID-19 despite having been vaccinated. So that's kind of troublesome news, but hopefully the vaccine keeps them out of trouble and out of the hospital. But perhaps moves them in certain cases to take the whole thing just a little bit more seriously. Still waiting on more news from this one, but I guess this is a short-ish thing maybe we can share before the break. We noted that it happened, I think, but we didn't gloat about it enough at the time. So let me share Rebecca Sager's piece from the front page of Daily Kos on the 29th. Insurrection subpoena arrives in Marjorie, I say traitor, Green's inbox. So she scream tweets. Well, of course she was going to squirm about it, but I guess she's got one. So that's cool. Rebecca puts it this way. I guess last week, right? Hump Day, last Wednesday. Just got a little brighter over here as we learn that someone in the inner circle of Trump bootlicker and QAnon apologist Georgia Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene is likely to be subpoenaed. So it's not her, but she would have gotten notice that perhaps someone close to her is going to be subpoenaed. Maybe her too. Who knows? Greene was on the attack on Wednesday morning, publicly posting an email sent by Sean Tonolli, I guess, Tonolli, a senior investigator on the House committee probing the January 6th insurrection. Greene not so subtly attempted to turn the blame from her unnamed associate to Democrats, whom she claims supported, cheered, and funded violent anti-government riots, she means in this case Black Lives Matter, without whatever consequence she seems to believe should accompany believing that Black lives actually matter. Meanwhile, she complains the Witch Hunt Committee, as in scare quotes there, investigates innocent people that had nothing to do with a random 3-hour riot. Yeah. Greene added that the email was being sent to some of President Trump's strongest supporters, which is supposed to mean, I guess, that she's a strong supporter, and she is. And is that supposed to mean something? Asks Rebecca. Of course the email is going to Trump supporters. Who else would storm the U.S. Capitol and attempt a coup after their cult leader lost an election? That's who should be getting subpoenaed, hopefully, as well as everyone else involved behind the scenes. So, yep, pretty much got it on target there. Green ends her Twitter rant apparently by implying that she will not comply with the subpoena. We'll see whether that works out for her. We won't be playing your stupid games anymore, she writes. Green has already been ousted from 2 congressional committees for acting like a fool in the halls of Congress and fined for her refusal to comply with mask mandates on the House floor. You'd think that the Republican leadership in the Congress would have some sense of responsibility to this institution, Pelosi said at a news conference way back on February 4th when she was thrown off those committees. But I guess for some reason, she said, they've chosen not to go down that path, and they haven't done it since. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and welcome back to Joan, who's been on vacation. How was that? Get a lot of rest?
It was good.
Good. I'm glad that it was good. We specifically asked Congress not to do anything while you were gone and to remain on the same. Yeah. So all we have to do is, make that request. And please don't pass any of these things, even though they're vitally important, and wait on it and stay on the same issue between now and when she comes back. And they did it. So you're in luck.
Except for the continuing resolution.
Oh, yes, right. True.
They did fund government, so.
Yes, that's true. It took away our annual, there could be a government shutdown thing.
No, they postponed it.
Oh, yes, right. I guess there could always be another one. Right, yeah, so they pushed it for a couple of months.
Another one.
Yeah. What's the new thing? Would they push it into?
I think it's December, I think is right around Christmas, because it always is.
Right. Okay. So, all right. Yeah, that's true. Then they'll want to leave town, and the pressure will be turned up, for people to abandon their principles so that they can get home in time for parties and the holiday and family or fundraisers, if that's your thing instead. They love to use that leverage. So at least they got that taken care of. That was pretty quiet too. That worked pretty well. Yeah, they
did that one pretty easily, I guess, because,
they still had the other one.
They've got the biggie.
Right.
There's the debt ceiling, and that's the one that.
Right. So here we stand with this, and of course infrastructure. I guess it still means it's Infrastructure Week. Haven't actually finished that one either, and we all know what's going on with the debt ceiling thing, but it is particularly annoying to watch Republicans, not just Mitch McConnell, but I did see Susan Collins for some reason decided to insert herself into this yesterday. That was annoying enough, but did you catch her? I mean,
yeah. If Democrats decide to abandon the budget resolution, I think this is what she said, she would be willing, and she thinks other Republicans would be willing to go ahead and do the debt ceiling thing.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's what it was.
Right. So, here we go. Now I found that Susan Collins suggests some GOP senators would back lifting the debt limit if Democrats totally abandon the $3.5 trillion spending package. So the reconciliation bill, I guess. She wants that jettisoned. I was wondering when you were saying the budget resolution, and that could have been it too. If you give up on trying
reconciliation.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just rusty. That's been 3 weeks.
It's an R. There's a resolution. There's a reconciliation.
You have to do the resolution in order to do the reconciliation.
That's true. And now that they're continuing to filibuster and make things difficult, the idea has arisen of, well, the idea that we've been suggesting, apparently that I've been suggesting on Twitter since 2011 for some reason, that you should, annually put some, anytime you do a reconciliation bill anyway, put a direction in for lifting or changing the debt limit or suspending it or whatever you're going to do. Don't use it if it's not necessary, but have it there as a backup at all times. But they made a decision not to do that. I think they kind of wanted to create this tension.
I think they kind of wanted to, but gosh, I wish they hadn't.
Yeah, because it's not good to have this going on.
Playing chicken with Mitch McConnell is never fun and never going to end up well for anyone.
Yeah. So
although
now
McConnell
they have to do
keeps
this
getting away with it, so I guess it ends up well for him.
Maybe. Right.
He keeps doing it. He thinks it works.
He seems to be enjoying it. So, and now they can go back, and people have figured it out procedurally that you can go back and amend the budget resolution so that there will be instructions in there for lifting the debt ceiling, but then you have to go and you have to have vote on that. And that entails its own vote-a-rama, apparently.
Right.
So McConnell is getting set to have, 8,000 ridiculous amendments to have, messaging votes and embarrassing things happening and time being wasted.
And
yes?
Joe Manchin is approving that tactic.
Oh, he loves vote-a-ramas, I guess.
Basically, he's saying, no, we'll do this. We'll do the budget resolution way, and that means lots and lots and lots of votes. But yeah, okay, that's fine with me. That's how we'll do it.
Yeah, I mean,
pushing up clear to October 17th at midnight, because Yellen has said it's October 18th that she runs out of extraordinary measures in order to avoid this.
So that's the game to get maximum excitement out of it.
And Manchin has given his approval of that process.
Okay.
And ruled out what would be the key thing to do: get rid of the filibuster on debt ceiling, if nothing else.
Right. Well, I'm certainly he'd rather sit through a vote-a-rama and have it run straight up to the deadline than embarrass himself and say, all right, the only thing left to do is that thing that I said I would never do. So it's an escape hatch for him. So of course he'll approve of that one. I thought the Collins thing, I don't even know why she's talking, but she decided to do that. And that was obviously a non-starter. Yeah, sure. Just chuck the whole reconciliation thing out and then we'll do it. But, it struck me that the upshot of that was, as Democrats have done an okay job reminding everybody that raising the debt ceiling is necessary because we ran out of money essentially as against the debt ceiling when Republicans ran things under Trump. And so this is paying for their spending.
Trump's bills.
Right. That doesn't seem to take with the press.
And I don't get it, because I don't get why that isn't the narrative. I don't get why Mitch McConnell being really horribly irresponsible and awful and dangerous isn't the narrative.
I don't know. For myself, of course, it was a less compelling narrative for the rest of the country. But to me, of course, I'm looking at it and saying, so what Collins is saying here is it's okay to borrow to pay Republican bills, but remember that the price of allowing you to borrow money to pay my bills is that you are not allowed to spend any money.
You can't have nice things.
Yeah. Republicans get to appropriate money and Democrats don't, which is pretty much their position on the filibuster back in, the nuclear option days. We'll refrain from nuking the filibuster back when they were in charge, and it was about judges in 2004. We'll refrain from doing that so long as you stop using the filibuster on anything. We won't get rid of it if you make it unnecessary to do. So, here we'll allow you to pay off the federal debts just so long as you only pay our debts and never use any money for your purposes. Well,
That's pretty much it.
I'll say no to that one, but also I'll say no to it because here's Susan Collins. What do I have to negotiate with you for? You are only relevant once every 6 years. Get lost. So.
Oh, gosh, Susan Collins.
Yep. But I guess maybe she feels bad. Is usually the attention that's on Cinema and Mansion is on her. Oh, she's the swing vote in this. We can bring her over or whatever it is. So maybe she's just jealous and thought she'd say something to the press. I don't know.
Perhaps. I mean, she does need to have the microphone in front of her whenever she has the opportunity. So, and nobody really takes her that seriously. But it is instructive that she articulated it so well for us.
Yeah. Well, I guess if she's going to try to cut a deal, that would be the one to try for. She's not particularly good at that, thankfully. So yeah. I'm happy with that. Well, I don't know. What else is going on that's been of interest to you in your first couple days back? Destruction of Facebook?
I can't remember the last time I logged into Facebook. I just need to finally delete my account. But, that was sort of interesting. What was really fun was how all of the conspiracy theories about what was happening to Facebook moved from Facebook to Twitter.
Yeah. I know. I don't usually see so much about what's going on Facebook, but they invaded and cluttered the place up and forced me to pay attention.
Kind of wreck Twitter for us for a little while.
Yeah, I don't know. And I was like, aren't there other things that people are constantly pretending they're inventing alternatives? Go there. But I don't know. They seemed
Parler tried, I think. I don't think it worked.
Oh, well. No one can capitalize on that. Let's see. I'm trying to think of other things.
It was an interesting cultural phenomenon, though, to see how the world reacted to 4 hours without Facebook.
Yeah.
More importantly, 4 hours without WhatsApp, because apparently that really is something a lot of people use to communicate with family overseas.
Yes.
I hadn't realized the reach of WhatsApp before.
I never understood it. I've had people recite it to me. It's just, I was like, well, why can't Twitter do that? I don't understand why you needed something different to communicate with people overseas. Because I don't know. I see people overseas all the time. Too many of you in Twitter.
Go into Twitter DMs. But I guess
it's just
I have no
popular. Idea. Yeah,
it's
I don't know.
It's also new, Kagro, and I am an old lady. I don't understand technology.
That's right. I have WhatsApp, but it's just blinking 12 all the time. That's basically what's going on here. It's natural it has something to do with the platform and the way it works, and I never tried it, and nobody overseas wants to hear from me anyway. So,
right.
Interesting. But that was a biggie.
My mom asked me yesterday, what's the difference between Instagram and Facebook? It's like, well, what is?
Yeah.
Really, when you get down to it?
Nothing now, I guess. Neither one of them work. But they're both owned by Facebook. And I don't know. I guess one started out differently, but then I never really understood why it did that either. And then when Twitter said, okay, you can share pictures here too. Okay, fine. I'm not a photographer, so that's fine.
They're pretty much just all hellholes, is my old lady response.
Pretty much. All right. Well, I think that's an apt description of it. And I was pleased to see the chaos briefly yesterday. But then, people started moaning and groaning about, my business is based on... All right, well, I feel bad for you about that. But maybe you shouldn't do that. You should maybe think about...
Maybe don't do that. Maybe find another place to have your business centered.
Yeah, the internet would be a great place. Have your own website. I heard that you could do that for like $5. So,
and now it's really easy.
Yeah.
It was kind of fun to see that personally... What's his face? Zuckerberg lost $7 billion yesterday.
Oh.
But since $7 billion doesn't really, that's pin money for him.
Right.
It was satisfying to an extent, but
yes, that
it
probably
made
bothered
absolutely no difference to him.
him. Yeah, and yeah,
Dropped
right,
him down from 3rd to 5th richest person in the world or something like that.
I'm sure he'll be back this afternoon. If the service is back up, then I guess they'll be fine. But he does deserve to take a hit, and will long term, just because this was just one in a series of really bad events for Facebook over the past couple of weeks. So,
and this one showed just how flimsy technologically they are, which, because this was an entirely internal problem, it was just a screw up on their routing, because all of their routing is in-house. They do all of the technology stuff in-house. And it broke everything. I mean, they couldn't use key cards. Actual staff couldn't get into buildings to do what they needed to do, which was essentially unplug it and plug it back in.
Yeah. I can't reach the plug.
Because
Help.
the locks on the door were tied to the server that was down.
Oh, that's funny. So there you go, right? Smart locks and the Internet of Things screwed you over on that one. That's pretty amazing.
So, interestingly, all of the money that they have and all of the money they spend, they're not spending on creating a robust system, which is kind of interesting. They're I think they're not spending money. I think they're just making and keeping it.
All right. Well, they're spending it on fancy locks. Get a key as a backup. That'll probably work.
But it was interesting that what they actually had to do was fly a team with physical keys to someplace in California to the room where the computers are so that they could manually reboot them.
That's pretty amazing. So in the end, Hal would not open the pod bay doors, and Facebook went down, and no one could have predicted this. All right. That's pretty weird. I didn't even realize that. I'm glad you told me the rest of that story, that they needed keys at the end. Because, you know that the door has one somewhere, right? But what were the keys doing off-site 4 hours away? I don't know. But that's pretty incredible.
It was all incredible. It's amazing. And, yeah.
I feel like I should have taken advantage. I wish I was a big hacker. I could have gone in there and turned up all the thermostats while they were locked out, and all the things you can do on the internet. Open the garage doors.
It's just a reflection of what an analog world we truly live in.
Yeah. I guess they really, it's a trap of their own making there. And, and probably something, maybe the loss of value is more permanent as investors say, wow, billions of dollars can be lost in a matter of hours with, a glitch.
Right. I
think brick and mortar means something.
It probably combined with wow, this really is an immoral cesspool, and really they are making all of their money out of, destroying the earth. Maybe that will be enough to get large investors to say, I think Facebook comes out of this week really tarnished on multiple fronts. Yeah. And that's good.
I think so. I mean, they deserve to be knocked down a couple of pegs for a lot of reasons. And I guess I haven't heard much yet about whether there was any. I guess all the data was preserved, so that's a lucky break for them too. But that's something that in the future,
Well, last week that there was the news of the big data scrape, where hackers or somebody just got something like 7 billion personal records of people's locations, names, phone numbers.
I think we're becoming as numb to that as we are to mass shootings at this point, but. That's entirely. I may have just missed the whole thing, but I was just worried about.
People were trying to tie the two things together yesterday, and I didn't spend a whole lot of time researching it, to tell you the truth, because I hate Facebook and I avoid dealing with it as much as I possibly can. But I did see scrolling through on Twitter that these two things were not connected, but yes, these two things are a big problem.
Yeah. Well, I'm just hoping maybe one day that, again, back to the investors thinking like, do you think that it's wise to have this company have a whatever hundreds of billions of dollars in market valuation if, the whole thing could go poof and then even it comes back? What if large chunks of the data are lost? Like if something breaks on the assembly line at General Motors and they fix it, the cars they were working on are still there and they can finish them and sell them. But you could turn the key back on at Facebook and find out that, everything's gone.
Yeah.
And people just say, I'm not going to rebuild my Facebook site. I'll just leave. I wanted to leave anyway. Forget it. Businesses are suing them for lost revenue. People who bought ads that didn't run want their money back. Like the whole thing collapses.
Yeah. And I think it has proven vulnerabilities that can really be exploited in the future. I think there are probably a lot of hackers that looked at what happened yesterday and are thinking, how can I make this happen again? What more could I do from the outside? This wasn't a hack, but I think it showed probably where the real vulnerabilities for Facebook are to be hacked.
Yeah.
So there's that threat too.
Well, I really would be surprised. I mean, I guess we still haven't found out whether there was any relationship between what happened yesterday and the expose on 60 Minutes the night before, whether that motivated somebody or that was part of somebody's dramatic exit from Facebook. But it's hard to believe that there was no connection. It was just coincidence, but maybe it was. But that would just show that they're just flawed on multiple levels.
Yeah.
So
it shows just how vulnerable they are.
Yeah.
Either from just bad tech.
Inside, outside, mistakes.
Inside, outside, how easy it is to exploit. It's really interesting. I hope that we see a good autopsy on this because I'm really curious to see what happens.
Yes. Well, I'm sure they'll be
because
fully
I can get
transparent.
into Facebook's destruction.
that
I'll
I can
pay
watch.
attention to.
Right, sure. Yeah, that's entertainment. As opposed to, I don't care about the business aspect of this, or I'm certainly not going to maintain a Facebook site, but falling apart, you bet. I can watch that.
I'm there for that.
Okay. Good. Well, we'll schedule that for next week. We'll see if it comes to fruition anytime soon. I'm trying to think also about, or also scrolling through your diaries. I did talk yesterday about the Postal Service banking venture. That was of interest to you, too. You picked up on that as well.
Well,
That's
it's kind of nice
exciting.
to have good news about the Postal Service.
Yeah.
I think it could be better still if DeJoy goes away.
Maybe.
Although I will
wasn't that
grudgingly
interesting?
acknowledge that this one thing he is doing
That
right.
was really surprising, although it was a good explanation of it. Like, okay, well, this could... this too might end up helping you personally somehow, but it was really interesting to see.
This is one where he doesn't have a financial interest in any potential competitor to the Postal Service. He doesn't have his fingers in any financial services pots, near as I can see. So
it's very it's certainly
Postal Service setting up financial services isn't going to impinge on anything he could personally make money from.
So why
his
not
whole
go
thing
ahead?
is in deliveries. That's where delivery systems is and companies is where he's made his money in the past and where he still has financial holdings.
Yeah.
So here he can do something that puts the Postal Service on better financial footing, burnishes his record a little bit. He can point at it and say, look, so I destroyed the delivery services, but I saved the post office because now it's making money off of being a bank.
Yes, and it could.
At least that's how I'm reading it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a possibility. I liked I thought the very clever move by the union, the Postal Workers Union, to recognize that he might be interested in doing something to get them on his side, despite the dispute they're having over what he's doing to the rest of the Postal Service. So I thought that was kind of clever.
It was smart of the union, and they exploited that well, and they're still saying, yeah, we still want to see him gone.
Yeah.
But this is a great thing that we're doing, that we're going to be able to do here.
Yeah, and we'll see whether he's able to, get any additional cooperation with them in the contentious part of their relationship by jumping out of the way, at the very least, of this and allowing it to go forward. And that may be what he's interested in too. This doesn't take
for
my
the
skin
folks
off
who
my
didn't
nose.
read the story.
Ah,
We should probably put a little background in. Right now, there's a pilot project in just 4 post office locations on the East Coast.
right. Yes.
In the Bronx,
We did talk
Falls
about it
Church,
yesterday.
Baltimore, and D.C.
Yes.
I think it was D.C. was the to allow people to cash paychecks and company checks.
Mm-hmm. And
Which-
this has been in the offing for a while, and I was surprised to see it pop up so quickly. I thought this was still years away.
Yeah, the Postal Service actually did have postal banking up until 1966. You could
Yes.
do all of this. You could pay your utilities at the Postal Service. You could do all of your banking essentially. And the only thing that they've kept since then is money orders, which you can still do through the Postal Service. So the authorization for them to be able to do to the extent that they're doing right now is there and it's legal. There's nothing Congress needed to do to allow them to do this pilot project. And there's probably more they can do. It'll be interesting to see how far they stretch that. It would be great if the postal banking legislation that's been introduced passed, because that would give them the full range of services and allow them to be more competitive with the payday loan type places.
That would be pretty good. I'd love it if they were actually full service, at least savings banks, if not necessarily offering all the financial instruments. But
just a simple debit card, savings account, and ATMs.
Yeah.
Really, just the ability to use the Postal Service without having to pay ridiculous fees for minimum balances and all of those kinds of things that keep people unbanked.
Right.
Just to allow them to pay their rent and pay their utilities.
It wouldn't be too bad for people who have access to regular banking services either. It would be a great opportunity for post offices to become known locations for like fee-free ATMs or something.
Exactly. Because there are there are post offices everywhere.
Yeah.
Every zip code has a post office.
Right.
And for unhoused people, for poor people, for older people who don't want to have to do all of their processes online, all of it makes a lot of sense.
It does.
And I'm kind of amazed that it's under Louis DeJoy that we're going back toward that.
Yeah, I don't know.
But he still has to go. I mean, he is still, at the same time,
Goodbye.
This is the week they are implementing his pay more for worse service plan.
Yeah, that's a part of the business that we don't... that explanation I haven't caught up with yet. I don't understand. What do you mean? More money, worse service? That seems like... I thought the whole idea of bringing
For
in
the
private
Christmas
sector
season,
people...
specifically, doing it right now.
Oh, so
At
a war
the
on
end of the
Christmas,
holidays,
essentially, is what
you
you're
are
saying.
going to have to pay more to have your package delivered more slowly.
Wow. Okay. War on Christmas. I didn't say it, but, just saying Louis DeJoy declared war on Christmas. That is very interesting. And, of course, the whole premise of this idea, well, we got to bring in business people to run the government like a business. And I thought you meant the opposite of pay more for worse service. That's why you said you wanted to, privatize everything so that we would get better service. No, actually, we're going to do the opposite. Well, then I vote against that. But okay.
So, yeah, he still has to go. And for
Pretty
him to go,
wild.
we have to also make sure that Ron Bloom, who is the head of the Board of Governors, goes. Because despite the
That's the
fact that Ron
process.
Bloom is a Democrat, he was appointed by a Democrat, he's
Yes.
DeJoy's big champion. So, yeah, that's not gone away. We're still trying to get rid of the guy. It doesn't
Okay.
mean postal banking goes away.
That's worth a look one of these days, too. Why would he be a booster of DeJoy? I'd love to know what the answer to that is.
There's some money stuff there, too. We can talk about that next time.
I imagine that would be it. All right, well, maybe we can get around to that. Unless, of course, they pass a giant infrastructure bill and a reconciliation bill between now and then. Or the government defaults. But let's see, we still have another week until after that.
More days after next week for that to happen.
But okay, so tomorrow or next week will be our last meeting under the old economic order and the old times before Thunderdome. Excellent. Thanks very much. Thanks for coming by. I'm glad to have you back. It was good to talk to you again after such a long stretch, but I hope you enjoyed your break.
I did enjoy my break. I'm refreshed and ready to deal with Congress again.
Okay, great. Thanks, Joan. We appreciate it, and catch up with you next week. And now...
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay. Pardon me. Now time, of course, for us to turn things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and for me to cough extensively instead of telling you what he has prepared for you on the air. But we'll see what we can choke out here. Mike Pence now blaming the media for the January 6th insurrection, where the mob chanted, "Hang Mike Pence." Couldn't be his fault, right?
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Then on to behind-the-scenes workers in Hollywood films and television shows who have voted to strike if they can't reach an agreement with producers on a new contract. You remember how things went with the writers' strike a couple of years ago? I don't think I ever went back to The Daily Show from after that. This could really impact things, so stay tuned for more on that next.